Good evening. Welcome to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Thank you for joining us for the 7th Annual Chuck Hagel Forum in Global Leadership. I'm Dr. Randy Adkins. I'm the Senior Associate Dean in UNO's College of Arts and Sciences. I'm a professor of political science, and I'm the director of the Hagel Forum's Planning Committee. The purpose of this event is to explore critical issues with global leaders in search of solutions to today's global challenges, just the kind of challenges to which Secretary Hagel has devoted his entire life. This evening's forum will feature opening remarks from retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, followed by a discussion with Rear Admiral Kirby and Secretary Hagel. The conversation will be moderated by Dr. Michelle Black, UNO Associate Professor of Political Science, using questions submitted in advance from UNO students in the campus community. This year's forum is again hosted in partnership with the Atlantic Council, a nonpartisan organization that galvanizes U.S. leadership and engagement in the world in partnership with allies and partners to shape solutions to global challenges. At this time, please turn your attention to the screen for a welcome video from Fred Kemp, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Atlantic Council.
Good evening, Omaha. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. I'm joining you tonight from our headquarters in Washington, D.C. for the 7th Annual Chuck Hagel Forum in Global Leadership, hosted by the University of Nebraska at Omaha in partnership with the Atlantic Council. We are honored to work with the University of Nebraska at Omaha again this year on this significant event. Since the Atlantic Council's founding in 1961, in the first year of the Kennedy administration, we have been guided by our enduring mission of promoting constructive U.S. leadership in the world alongside partners and allies to shape a better future. That mission is more critical than ever. Tonight, you will hear from two leaders who have dedicated their lives to that brand of American leadership and the principles it represents. Secretary Chuck Hagel, a Nebraska native, is a world-class statesman and strategist, someone I've had the pleasure of working alongside for many years in common cause. From his service in Vietnam, where he earned 2 Purple Hearts, to leading the USO, to his 2 terms in the United States Senate, to his tenure as the 24th Secretary of Defense, Secretary Hagel has demonstrated a commitment to public service and a deep understanding of America's indispensable role in maintaining peace and security around the world. He served as the Atlantic Council's chairman from 2009 to 2013. He serves today at the Atlantic Council as a distinguished statesman and member of the Atlantic Council's International Advisory Board. Secretary Hagel will be joined by another extraordinary public servant with a long and distinguished record of experience, both in uniform and as a civilian, retired Admiral John Kirby. Admiral Kirby served in the U.S. Navy for nearly 30 years, including deployments to the Middle East and the Mediterranean. He became the first uniformed officer to serve as spokesperson for the Department of Defense under none other than Secretary Chuck Hagel. He was also spokesperson and Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs at the State Department before returning to the Pentagon in 2021 as Chief Spokesperson and Advisor to former Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. John went on to become the National Security Council's Coordinator for Strategic Communications. In that role, he was the White House's principal voice on international affairs, responsible for explaining U.S. foreign policy to the American people and to the world. Admiral Kirby is a great communicator and strategic thinker who is praised for his judgment and for his integrity. I can think of few leaders more qualified to discuss this challenging moment for the United States leadership in the world than Secretary Chuck Hagel and Admiral John Kirby. I'm proud the Atlantic Council has joined forces again with the University of Nebraska at Omaha to host this latest installment of the Chuck Hagel Forum in Global Leadership. Now back to you in Omaha.
It's now my pleasure to introduce UNO Chancellor Joanne Lee. Since joining UNO, Dr. Lee is focused on positioning the university and Omaha as a partner with the state's workforce development leadership through innovative approaches to teaching, learning, working, research, affordability, and partnerships, as well as student retention and support. As a first-generation college student and native of Hong Kong, Dr. Lee has a passion for serving learners of all ages and all social, cultural, and economic backgrounds, and ensuring UNO Mavericks have the resources and support they need to excel in their academic, personal, and professional journeys. Dr. Lee earned her PhD in finance from Florida State University and holds the Chartered Financial Analyst Charter designation. She is a highly engaged leader and scholar who's committed to fostering academic and research excellence, community partnerships and engagement, a welcoming and inclusive environment, critical thinking, creativity and discovery, high integrity, and the maverick spirit that drives our university community to transform life locally, nationally, and globally. Please join me in welcoming UNO's 16th Chancellor, Dr. Joanne Lee.
On behalf of the University of Nebraska, Omaha, thank you and welcome all of you to share this evening with us. Today, University of Nebraska celebrates the I Love NU Day at the Capitol under Dr. Gold, the 9th president of the NU system. Today is a very special day. We have a lot of students show up. We have a lot of supporters show up. I don't think I have to tell you what kind of environment we're operating right now in higher education. But one thing that I want to reaffirm to all of you here to share this evening with us, our number one goal, our number one constituents will always be our students and our learning community. In fact, in UNO core statement, UNO is aspired to educate people of the world. We're not going to walk away from this commitment. So I cannot tell you how privileged that we feel to have this opportunity to actually share with you. Since 2019, under the leadership of Secretary Hagel, we created this forum. We think this is very important to have the community to talk about the leadership, right? The role of US leadership in a changing world. So during the Capitol visit, I had a lot of people came to me and say, I'm coming to the Hagel Forum. I say, that's wonderful. So the Hagel Forum now, it's really like an event that people look forward to annually. I'm not saying that because Secretary Hagel is here. I'm saying that because a lot of centers actually pay attention. I wish I can go. And I said, yes, I understand. So let's count ourselves to be a privileged one tonight to share a very exciting conversation. So thank you, Secretary Hagel, for indulging us with your time and your commitment to this event tonight. Now, soon you'll be hearing from Secretary Hagel and also Admiral John Kirby. And I want to thank them ahead of time, because this kind of event doesn't just come accidentally. It's with a lot of thoughts, a lot of planning, a lot of relationship building. So we are honored to have them here tonight to spend an evening with you. And I also want to, say thank you to all the students that are coming here tonight. This is your event. Is your event. Is your time to listen carefully. And I also want to thank our colleagues, our faculty, our staff to be here tonight. And I want to also thank Dr. Michelle Black. She is going to be a moderator. She's going to be phenomenal. And I also want to thank the Dean, the College of Arts and Science, for hosting this event. I am just happened to say this in front of the Dean, and the Dean's always, I don't have to say anything, you go and say it. And I just want to say thank you to the College of Arts and Science to provide this kind of opportunity. This event is very important to me. It's very important to you. Please allow yourself to have a whole night to engage in this conversation. And everybody knows, all the way, not just in the United States, around the world, Secretary Hagel is a UNO Maverick. So please welcome back the 1971 Maverick back to UNO. And at this point, I want to invite Randy back to the podium to read a little bio of Secretary Hagel. It's going to be a really short bio. Consider man is really well accomplished. So Randy, please.
Well, it's my honor to introduce the very person that has brought us here today, a fellow UNO Maverick, a servant leader, and a true example of what it looks like to serve our community and our country. Chuck Hagel was the 24th United States Secretary of Defense. He's the only Vietnam veteran and very first enlisted combat veteran to serve in that position. Prior to serving as Secretary of Defense, Secretary Hagel served 2 terms in the United States Senate representing the state of Nebraska, as co-chairman of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, and as the Deputy Administrator of the Veterans Administration. and that's just a little bit of what he did. Secretary Hagel has pursued many opportunities to be actively engaged within the spheres of global leadership in our community, our state, our nation, and the world. Secretary Hagel was born in North Platte, Nebraska. He's the oldest of 4 brothers, and he graduated from St. Bonaventure High School in Columbus, Nebraska in 1964. And he's a 1971 graduate of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Chuck Hagel.
Thank you. Randy, thank you, and Chancellor Lee, thank you. I very much appreciate being invited back to UNO because it's an important institution for our state, for our country, but it's an important institution for me because when my brother Tom and I came back from Vietnam, after serving together in Vietnam in 1968, I needed to finish school. He needed to start college. I had attended 3 colleges prior. They were not illustrious beginnings, and but UNO took me in anyway. And I've always appreciated what I learned at UNO and the people who influenced me here. One of those individuals is here tonight who is a spouse of one of the great leaders of this institution over the years, Dr. Orville Menard, who was chairman of the political science department. And so it's wonderful to see her again. I start my brief comments in my introduction of Admiral John Kirby this way, because I think all of us in our lives are shaped, molded by mentors, by institutions, by people who cared about us, certainly starting with our parents, our relatives, our friends. But we go outside those boundaries, and we are who we are because of how those people touched our lives. And UNO is one of those institutions. Now, it's my true honor tonight and pleasure to, yes, join you and again, have an opportunity to discuss some pretty big issues in our world. But also, this individual that has agreed to come back and be part of our event this year is a special person to me. He is an individual who, when I was Secretary of Defense, I selected to be my chief spokesman at the Pentagon. At the time, it was unprecedented for a Secretary of Defense to choose as his spokesman a career uniform military official. That position had always gone to a political person. Nothing wrong with political people. But Kirby brought something for me and what I thought I needed to do the best job I could as Secretary of Defense, a unique understanding of the military and a unique understanding of service. What I want to emphasize about John Kirby tonight, and you know his bio, you've heard some of his bio, you've read some of his bio, is not just that bio, but it's who he is and what shaped him. What really propelled him to be the kind of public servant that this country has been blessed with over our years for 250 years. He comes from a family of public servants. Father in the military, grandfather in the military, cousins. You could say, well, maybe he didn't know any different. Maybe he didn't. But he has an immense amount of talent where he could have gone anywhere and done anything with all that talent and that ability. But he chose to spend his 30-some years of his career in public service. And I think that's pretty special. We have people here tonight who are veterans, who have served this country and still do in many ways, who shaped this country and who influence our next generation of leaders, just as I was influenced by the people who influenced me. And I don't think we give enough credit to or attention to the people who really deserve credit, that we just take for granted, and they never ask for credit. They just do what they think is the right thing for themselves, of course, their families, but their country. And they put other people first. And I think at a time when, as I said about an hour ago in a reception, when the country, when the world is dangerously upside down, when there is historic uncertainty in the world today and in our country, it's so important that we can rely on people who put the country first, who have in fact put service first. And that's the story of John Kirby, unique individual that I'm very proud to say I worked with, colluded with, and relied on, and has developed a special friendship with me and with my family. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is not all there is to say about John Kirby, but it's the beginning point of John Kirby, because it gives, like we all need and we all have, a purpose to our lives. And he's had that, and that's public service. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral John Kirby.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. I wish my mom could have been here to hear that introduction, sir. I'm going to make sure she watches this tomorrow when it is on YouTube. And you're right, sir, I didn't really have a choice. My father, as you mentioned, served in the Navy in the 1950s on an aircraft carrier, and I came from a big Irish Catholic family, 6 kids, 5 boys. He wanted to make sure all of us served in the military. He said, we live in the greatest country in the world, you're going to pay something back. The only choice we had was the branch of service. So even though Nixon got rid of the draft in '74, there was, by God, conscription in my house, and I did not have a choice. But a special thank you again to everybody here, to Chancellor Lee, Dean Bloom, Professor Atkins, Mr. Kemp, and the Atlantic Council for their help here, for the chance for me to be here with you tonight. I am truly, truly honored by it. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, as well, for your role in establishing this important leadership forum, for the ability that you bring to it, to important discussions at critical times to talk about some of the most thorny national security issues facing the United States now and well into the future. And of course, thank you not only for your own service in peace and in war and in combat, but also for the support that you and Mrs. Hagel continue to provide the men and women of the armed forces and their families and veterans still over and over again. That is true public service, sir. In fact, that is a great segue to what I want to spend a few minutes talking about with you tonight, which is basically leadership at the highest levels. Now, as has been noted, I just wrapped up an assignment at the White House, serving as the chief spokesperson for the National Security Council. Before that, I was at the Pentagon, of course, and then before that, as the secretary mentioned, I spent quite a bit of years in uniform. I was blessed over the course of all that time to work for some incredible leaders and to witness remarkable developments and truly, truly historic events. And so tonight, I'd like to offer you, policymakers in your own right, leaders, decision makers, and soon to be policymakers, sure, a little advice on how important decisions are best reached, and just as critically, how they are best communicated. So today, I'd like to be your press secretary for a few minutes. I'm going to start with an acronym because we love acronyms in the government. That's what we do best. The acronym is NIDBIT. It's NDBIT. And before I tell you what it means, I want to tell you a story. It is February 2012, Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. A small number of U.S. troops, while trying to prevent communication between captured insurgents, burn copies of the Quran and other religious materials. The act is witnessed by local Afghans who try to stop it, but not before several of the holy books are incinerated. Protests erupt at the site and outside the base. Protests spread quickly to other parts of Afghanistan. Some of them turn violent, fueled by the Taliban, who try to exploit what they believe is American insensitivity. After 5 days of protests, 30 people are killed, including 4 Americans. Almost immediately, the commander of U.S. and coalition forces, Marine Corps General John Allen, removes our advisors from the ministries and orders commanders to enact appropriate force protection measures. He then visits troops in the field. Allen urges the troops not to overreact, to remember who they are and why they are there. We must show the Afghan people, Allen said, quote, that as bad as that act was at Bagram, it was unintentional, and Americans do not stand for this. We stand for something greater. Back in Kabul the next day, Allen's advisors peppered him with ideas to improve the security situation. Suspend all the training, one suggested. Another said establish a multi-agency working group. Still another told him he should beef up his counterintelligence efforts. Allen took it all in, and then he just shook his head. NIDBIT, he said. NIDBIT. Everyone but me, I had just reported there for a short stint with him, everybody but me understood what he meant, and they all kind of shuffled out the door. I stayed behind because I just had to know what NIDBIT was. Allen said it's a lesson that he learned from a mentor a long time ago. It means no decision before it's time. Good leaders, he said, make the tough calls when they need to make them and not a moment before. It sounds simple, and I guess in fact it is, but it can be a frustratingly difficult rule to apply in the face of unrelenting public attention and a hyperactive social media environment. One's instinct is naturally to act quickly, even completely, to try to make the pressure go away. But of course, a major story like that does not go away easily, and it shouldn't. This was a critical time in Afghanistan, a dangerous time. And the Afghan people, the American people, our troops and their families were as well served by responsible press coverage of those events as they were by the thoughtful, deliberate, and reasoned policy decisions of General John Allen. He would eventually enact most of the suggestions that his advisors posed, and even a few more. And though 2012 would see insider attacks peak, it wouldn't be long before the effects of his new policies would take root. Allen had been cautious, but he had been wise, and NIDBIT helped make him so. That leads to my second bit of advice. You are not only responsible for the timing of your decisions, but you're also responsible for putting them into proper perspective, into time and space. Putting things in perspective really comes down to 3 things. 1, envisioning the future that you seek. 2, aligning that future to the core values of your organization. And then 3, understanding how your decisions relate to a larger whole, including to how you've made similar decisions in the past. So let me tell you another story. It's February 2nd, 2010, and we're on Capitol Hill. The gallery of the hearing room for the Senate Armed Services Committee is packed with spectators and reporters. Sitting at the table before the committee is Secretary of Defense Bob Gates and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Admiral Mike Mullen. The two leaders have been called to testify about the Pentagon's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, a policy that forbade gay and lesbian men and women from serving openly in the armed forces. Now, Secretary Gates will tell the committee members that he wants to study it and make sure that he completely reviews the issue further. Admiral Mullen concurs with that approach. But then Mullen goes further in fact than any other senior military officer had ever gone before. He said, "Speaking for myself and myself only, it is my personal belief that allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly would be the right thing to do. For me," the Admiral continues, "it comes down to integrity, theirs as individuals, ours as an institution." Now, many more months of study and debate lay ahead before Don't Ask, Don't Tell would be taken off the books. But even the most ardent advocate of the policy had to admit that Mullen's testimony really put the death knell to it, was pivotal to its demise. What they didn't know on that cold winter day was all the effort and care that Admiral Mullen took in arriving at his conclusion. He applied lessons from his own experience with gay and lesbian sailors going all the way back to the Vietnam War. He stood up a team to study the history of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to examine the policies and practices of other militaries, and to gauge shifting attitudes in America and in the ranks. He spoke to troops all over the world at all levels of the chain of command. He resisted the power of myth and preconceived notions and charted a course that, when looked back upon by future generations, he believed would show the wisdom of supporting repeal. And here we are, more than 10 years later, and I think we can all agree in the wisdom of the repeal of that policy. He had a vision of the future, and he aligned it to core values. Secretary Hagel was very good at this sort of thing as well. Whatever issues he faced, be it Russian aggression in Europe, the rise of ISIS, climate change, or even a foundering defense program, he always tried to see the situation in time and space. He read voraciously, particularly history, biography, literature, and of course, news and commentary, looking for common threads that offered some kind of context. We can't fix everything, he believed, alone or with a pinpoint answer. He said, quote, "Many times we find that the problem can only be solved through an evolving process of solutions, ultimately getting to the high ground of resolution." Now that's classic Hegel. Strive for resolution, not just solution. In other words, put things in perspective. Now, as he also noted in that quote, the decision-making process often evolves over time. You may find your thinking challenged by criticism you hadn't considered or events you hadn't predicted. Never be afraid to change your mind. And that's my last bit of advice tonight. One final story. It's autumn 2014. West Africa is in the grips of an Ebola outbreak. Secretary Hagel orders American troops to Liberia and to Senegal to help stem that outbreak. Right from the beginning, the Secretary made clear to the troops and to the American people that the troops would not be treating Ebola patients. Now, some critics argue that because the military has expertise in treating infectious disease, that we should be playing a more active role in treatment. That Secretary Hagel was holding back and being too cautious. To make sure that he isn't missing something, Secretary Hagel asked military leaders to consult with USAID, which was the lead U.S. agency at the time, as well as governments in Liberia and Senegal, all of whom insist that the most pressing demand was not for caregivers, but rather for the facilities and tools and infrastructure with which caregivers could do their jobs. So our troops built clinics. They set up mobile laboratories. They established an effective logistics and transport capability so that medicines and caregivers could get to the people who most desperately needed it. They did this all masterfully, avoiding contact with Ebola patients. When it was time to start bringing them home, military leaders saw no need for a quarantine, just a self-monitoring protocol. And that's what I told the press, day after day after day. But once again, Secretary Hagel was unafraid to challenge assumptions. After hearing from families, local communities here in the United States, and reporters as well, about concerns over exposure to the disease from returning troops, he reverses course and he orders a 21-day quarantine. When I asked him what I should now tell those same reporters after we had so vigorously opposed a quarantine, the secretary just smiled and said, "John, just tell them I changed my mind. I'm the Secretary of Defense. I get to do that." And it worked like a charm, sir. Now, not a single member of the armed forces ever showed symptoms of Ebola, but that did not make less valid the concerns that were expressed, the safety measures we imposed, or the open minds that Secretary Hagel and military leaders kept during and after that mission. Circumstances will change. The best leaders will change with them. In June of 2022, President Biden restored an Obama-era policy that barred the use of anti-personnel landmines except on the Korean Peninsula. We said at the time, this is June of 22, that this policy better aligned with our obligations to the Ottawa Convention, which is conventionally called the Mine Ban Treaty. But then, in the fall of 24, as the Russians continued to make aggressive gains in Ukraine, the president allowed some of those mines to be shipped to our Ukrainian partners. As then Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin put it, it was a necessary reaction to the way the Russians had changed their tactics. They weren't using tanks as much anymore to blast their Ukrainian lines. They were using what we call dismounted forces. These are large and sometimes small troop formations on the ground. So they were using human beings to push through rather than machinery. Austin said that the Ukrainians needed, quote, things that can help them slow down that effort. And the landmines decision, however controversial it was, and it was, met that critical need. Changing your mind, listening to contrary views, adapting to new circumstances is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength in a leader, a sign of adaptability and purpose and self-awareness. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings to a close my little bit of advice to you. Just to quickly recap, if I might. Don't make decisions before you need to. Remember NIDBIT. When you do make decisions, align them to your core values and the future you seek. Put them into perspective. Think in time and space. And when you get up to explain those decisions, make sure you can say that you heard all sides, that you considered new circumstances, and that maybe you even changed your mind a little bit. If you can do those things, you can lead and communicate effectively in today's information environment. Your decisions, your policies will be sustainable, they'll be credible. And you can spur real and lasting change. As General Allen said, then you can stand for something greater. Thank you.
Once again, let's thank Admiral Kirby for his remarks. I would like to now welcome you to the second portion of this evening's event. My name is Michelle Black, and I currently serve as the co-director for the Nebraska Deterrence Lab, and I'm an associate professor of the Department of Political Science at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. It is my honor tonight to moderate this conversation with the both of you at the 7th Annual Chuck Hagel Forum in Global Leadership. Let me briefly give you some background for this discussion. Some of you in the room may remember that as the Cold War ended, America's position at the apex of the global order seemed secure. With democracy's victory over communism complete, the United States appeared posed to exercise an unchallenged, benevolent, global leadership rooted in American values, democracy, and open markets. Yet, just 30 years later, the US leadership in the international order it helped to build with its allies in the wake of World War II faces a number of complex challenges. This contemporary reality was the impetus for the creation of the Chuck Hagel Forum in Global Leadership. We asked the University of Nebraska at Omaha students to think about how these challenges will affect our position as a global leader and invite them to submit some questions. We have received several questions and in many cases have tried to combine the questions to cover a variety of topics. Without further ado, let's begin. Both of you worked together in important roles during the Obama administration. Secretary Hagel, US Secretary of Defense, Admiral Kirby, US Press Secretary, Pentagon Press Secretary. Can you both talk about your time working together? What is the relationship like between a cabinet secretary and the press secretary? And what were the major challenges you faced during those years?
You want to go? Or you want me to? One of the things you learn is defer to the boss, so I'm...
That's true. But there's another lesson. You go first.
Yes, sir. It's interesting to be a good press secretary, and I've had the privilege of standing up now at all three of the main podiums in D.C., State, White House, and of course the Pentagon 3 times. To be an effective press secretary, you have to have a good relationship with the principal, whoever the boss is, in this case, the Secretary of Defense. If there's not a good personal relationship there, then trust will suffer, and your credibility as a spokesman will go down, because if the press feel, even for a nanosecond, that you don't have access to the secretary, that you don't have his ear, or that you can't get in to see him, or he's not trusting you with information, then you're useless at the podium. They'll know that they can't really rely on you to be an accurate conveyor. And so the personal relationship is really important. And we didn't know each other really before, I don't think. Maybe I've met once. But I remember my interview with the secretary. He asked me very early in the interview, "What do you need from me?" Which is, I think, just a mark of what a great leader is and does. There's a humility there. What can I do for you, even though you're going to be working for me? And I only asked him for 3 things. I asked him for access. I needed to be able to know what was in his head. I asked him to allow me to speak freely. You can't be a good press secretary if you can't speak truth to power. And sometimes that means going in and telling a boss what they don't want to hear. And the secretary was fine with that. And the last thing I asked him, and this gets to a little bit of what he said in his intro, I asked him to keep me out of the politics, because I was wearing a uniform at the time, and typically that job is done by a political appointee, and I didn't want to get sucked into politics. And not only did the secretary readily say, "Don't worry about that," but he checked on me from time to time. At least once a month, if not more, would pull me aside and ask me, "How's it going? Are you getting pulled into politics? Is the White House putting any pressure on you?" I mean, he was constantly checking on that. So we developed, I believe, a very strong rapport, a lot of trust and confidence there. And the last thing I'll say, and then I promise I will stop talking, but is that one of the things each podium is different in D.C. The White House press corps is different than the Pentagon press corps, and they're different than the State Department press corps. But the one common question that I got at all 3 is some form of why. Why are you sending that carrier to that location? Why are you spending this much money on this particular fighter jet? Why are you in negotiations with you pick the country? They want to understand what is in the mind of the principal, what they're thinking, how they have, as the secretary, as I mentioned in my speech, how they evolved to the decision-making process that they did. And you can't, if you're not with the boss, if there's no trust and confidence there, you can't answer that question. So I was lucky in all 3 podiums that I had the privilege to stand at. I could look at reporters honestly and say, "This is exactly what the boss is thinking. This is where his head is. This is why we're moving in that direction." And if you can connect dots, then you can't fail as a press secretary.
He just displayed why he was my press secretary. Credibility and trust are everything. I mean, in life, in relationships, in institutions. I mean, that is the coin of the realm. I would add one other thing, and I've been fortunate over my career and all the different things I've done in the United States Senate. I've got some of my former Senate people here tonight who I worked closely with for 12 years. You have to like each other, too. I think that's a key. It's not trust and confidence, maybe, but it's almost as important because you're spending a lot of difficult time at the Pentagon with your press secretary on difficult issues and difficult questions that are real questions and that need real answers because you owe it to the American people, and you owe it to the Congress, and you owe it to all people who are accountable for conducting services. And I think you've got to like each other. And another part of this I would add would be a sense of humor. You got to have a little fun with it. I mean, you wonder how in the hell do you have fun as Secretary of Defense? But you know, it wasn't all a daily laugh-in show, but we did have fun.
We did.
I mean, and I think that's key too to doing a good job, especially with high-level, high-pressure jobs. You want to have a little humor to break that edge.
Thank you very much for that answer. Admiral Kirby, you dealt with numerous crises throughout your career and especially during your time at the White House. Can you guide us through how you worked through some of those challenges during the Biden administration from a communications perspective?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot. The first thing in any crisis is you got to get information. You have to know what's happening. And that means, you know, back to my remarks, my lesson from John Allen, NIDBIT, right? Don't rush to get out to the podium. Don't rush to get on TV. Don't rush to comment until you really know what's going on. And so whether it was at the White House, I had the Situation Room I could go to. I had the Command Center at the Pentagon. First, get information. You just get as much as you can. And make sure that the information flow from an operational and a policy perspective includes you. Now, that wasn't really a problem. I mean, Secretary Hagel always made sure that I was where I needed to be and that I was at his arm and I could be right with him. But for some spokespeople, that can be tough. You've got to make sure that you're in the room as the decisions are being made, the information's coming in so that you understand what's going on. That's number one. Number two is you got to quickly establish in a crisis who's going to be the spokesperson. Because you can, in the first couple of days at least, you want one person, one face, one voice that the American people can learn to trust. Then later on, you know, other people can get involved, but you got to have one person designated. And then the third thing is you know, you've got to make sure that at the right time and in the right forum, the principal, the boss, gets out to speak as well and puts their voice. So like if it was the Navy Yard shooting, I was the head of Navy Public Affairs when that happened. And then, of course, during the Afghanistan withdrawal, when I was working for Secretary Austin, we had a series of incidents inside that withdrawal that you could easily deem as crises. The first few days were very, very, very chaotic and dramatic for people as the Afghans were storming the airfield and storming airplanes. And of course, we lost 13 at Abbey Gate. And then shortly towards the end of the withdrawal, we took an errant strike and killed an innocent man and some of his children, all horrific. And you know, we tried to treat each one of them as a unique event and communicate as well as we could. Working at the White House, of course, there was a series of individual crises, but obviously the two big ones were continued Russian gains in Ukraine, and then, of course, the terrible, deadly, evil attack by Hamas on the 7th of October, where 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered in a day, and so many other dozens taken captive. The key, again, was making sure I knew exactly what the president knew and the conversations he was having, and then I could translate that for the American people, making sure that he got his voice out, and both of those incidents, well, throughout the Ukraine war, but certainly with Gaza, the president was not shy about getting out there and communicating what he was doing, and then just staying flexible as things change. But the last thing I'll say here, when something like that, something really dramatic happens, and October 7th is a good example, it's like you have to slow down. You want, immediately, you know you got to do some things. You got, what's the president thinking? What's he hearing? What are we doing? What do we know? And we started working on a statement for President Biden that morning because we knew that he was going to want to say something, even as the information was still not fully there. But you've got to also take a breath, take a knee, slow down, and think about what you're doing, not just that day, but what is tomorrow going to look like and the day after that, and start to make sure you're building out the relationships with reporters, but also with your counterparts overseas. I mean, one of the things that I was very proud of and still am is still my relationship, although he's no longer in the job, but with the Israeli Defense Force spokesman, who was also a two-star admiral, that they made their spokesman, Dan Hagari, just a great guy. And Dan and I mean, we talked almost every day in some form or fashion, just so that we knew what each other, what we were doing, and what we were going to say about what was going on.
Thank you. And you touch upon a question that has to do with deciding what our roles should be. And so I'd like to actually discuss that right now and ask both of you, but Admiral Kirby, during crisis like we've seen with October 7th, with Gaza, with the other events that go on, how can you walk us through, and of course you too, Secretary Hegel, how the decision process is done about what our role should be in certain things? How do we decide to be involved in those crises?
In the White House, that was oftentimes the first question we asked ourselves. Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, very thoughtful, very humble, but one of the smartest people I've ever had the privilege to work with. That was almost always the first thing he asked. And he'd ask it of himself, but he would ask it of all of us, including us in the communications world. You know, what should our posture be? What should we be thinking about that we're not right now? What should we be doing? And just as critically, what should the president be doing, or how should he be involved in ways that maybe we're not thinking about? And you know, when I talked a little bit tonight about changing your mind, I had Jake in mind because he was never afraid to have his own assumptions challenged or to have people say, no, that's not what we ought to be doing. But it's got to, that's like the first question you have to ask yourself. And it's, to simplify, I would say put it in two buckets. One is policy. What kind of policies should we, what posture policy-wise should we have? Do we need to call allies and partners? Do we need to get them more involved? And then communications. And the communications have got to be lashed up with the policy because public around the world, they'll smell a fake. If you're saying one thing and doing another, you know, that's never going to be deemed as credible. So the communications process has to run in parallel with the policy decision-making process.
I would add to what John's already said. I used to ask this question in Foreign Relations Committee hearings because I think it's applicable to what you've just asked, but to everything. Then what happens? What happens next? Where's this going? No one is wise enough to be able to answer all those questions, but you better be thinking that way. And you've got to get beyond the immediate. It's all about tomorrow. Today's gone. And if you focus that way on your thinking and with your team, and this also, I think, gets to the relationship of your team, how important that is. When these emergencies and these conflicts erupt, and these crises erupt, and they always do, and they always will, that's why it's so important to have those relationships with your team. And especially your press person, who can almost stay ahead of you in your thinking, because he or she knows you and how you think and how you're going to react. Now, that doesn't take the place of the facts, but that's got to be part of the process that you use. In the examples that he just cited, I think, are good examples of what I'm talking about. But we can get so mired down and lost in the events of the day that we lose sight of where this is going. And the press deserves answers on this, not because they're the press, but because they represent the American people.
So I'd actually like to continue this conversation on foreign policy. You talked a little bit about the relationship of the team, but let's expand that to include our allies. And let's look at...
Our allies, you said?
Yes, our allies. Looking at the past, how we've worked with our allies, NATO, for example, and now where we are today. Can you both talk a little bit about how we've worked in the past and where this new direction might be going?
Well, I'll let you handle on where this might be going. I'll take more of a focus on the past, but well, I would start with this statement. Allies are critical to the security of this country, the future of this country. In every discipline. And one of the areas that I talk about in recent interviews, for example, because I was Secretary of Defense and maybe know a little more about that area than most, we could not project power around the globe like America has projected power since World War II without allies. And one of the reasons for that, it might be one of the most important reasons, is because allies allow us, and John was stationed all over the world, to use their land to house our troops, to house our ships, to house our planes, to house our rockets, that if we didn't have that, we'd be like China or Russia. They don't have any relationships that do that. China, I think, has got one Djibouti, that great power Djibouti, on the Red Sea. Russia doesn't have anything like that. And is it in the interest of the allies too? Sure it is. Of course it is. But that was the whole intent of the post-World War II world order, to work together to assure that we didn't have another World War II or World War I, or worse, a nuclear exchange, and give all countries options to do better educate, be more prosperous, work with each other. Obviously, NATO was a result of that, and NATO's been the most important collective security institution in the history of man. Now, these institutions are imperfect. Of course they are. You're always having to deal with them, like any institution, to make them better, adjust, so on. United Nations. United Nations, a lot of problems. But you think about the United Nations for a minute and all the things that it does. Do you think the world would be better today if we had no United Nations? Oh, I don't think so. Healthcare, I mean, so many things. USAID for us. Every institution that we have, that we've used, even starting with World War II, Radio Free Europe, during World War II has enhanced us, has made us better. And again, yes, we've made mistakes and still will, but we can self-correct in a free country. And we've done that for 250 years. We have 27 amendments to the Constitution because we didn't get it all right the first time. And one, we had to do it twice because we decided we liked to drink. And so we got rid of that one amendment that said, no, you can't drink legally. So common sense too. But I think allies, I mean, in my mind, that isn't even a question. It's so clearly in the interest of our country to have friends, to have supporters, to have allies who we rely on. Immigrants, I know the immigrant issue is a big political issue and everybody does, but we're a nation of immigrants. We all came from immigrants. And there are bad people, yeah, I get that, and then we need to deal with them, I get that. But let's don't do what we're doing here and just push, categorize, classify immigrants as bad people and terrible people and people who break the law and abuse our system. So I think, and I'll end this way, I think what your question begs, and I'll be interested in John's thoughts on this, but it really brings out a point here that I think is the reality of our times, and that is that we are truly living through defining times. I think what we're living through right now and into the future, the most defining time in the history of the world since World War II, and how we treat this over the next few years and how we self-govern and make some decisions here in the United States is going to very much define the future of mankind in the world.
I agree, obviously, with all of that. One of my other former bosses, John Kirby, used to say there should be nothing foreign about foreign policy, because the world is just too small right now and it's too interconnected, and what happens overseas absolutely affects us, even if you don't think it will. Ukraine, I heard folks in DC talk about it as if it was a foreign war, had nothing to do with us, decrying the support that was being provided to Ukraine, and it always made me wonder, had anybody thought about, if you're worried about the cost of supporting Ukraine as they're trying to fight for their sovereignty, they're not expanding territory, they're just trying to get back what is theirs. Imagine how much more expensive that's going to be, not just in treasure, but in blood, if you just let Putin do what he wants. And believe me, his overarching goals in Ukraine have not ebbed. He still doesn't believe Ukraine should exist as a country. Well, then what? Then he's right up against the border with NATO. And if you think it costs a lot to support Ukraine now, think about how much more it's going to cost when American troops are right there facing Russian troops on the other side, and what that could look like. It would be disastrous. So trying to get ahead of problem sets overseas, trying to stem them, working with others, because even yes, the United States has historically been the biggest supporter of Ukraine, but we didn't do it by ourselves. To the Secretary's point, we needed support throughout Central and Western Europe to be able to base our troops, to provide a capability to get munitions and weapons and systems into Ukraine, keep that flow. And then, of course, the other countries have also contributed a lot. No, not as much as us, but they gave Ukraine certain things that we couldn't, like in the early days of the war. Great example, the Ukrainian military, when Putin walked across the line in 2022, was Western in the way that they organized themselves and led and managed their formations, but they were still very post-Soviet in terms of the equipment that they had. And so at the beginning months of the war, they needed surface-to-air missile systems, for instance, that we just didn't have and couldn't give them because they weren't used to fighting on anything other than old Russian stuff. And so thank goodness for our European partners who were able to come in with what they had. I mean, no problem, in my view, is going to get solved by America alone. We need partners, but it's not just about the additional credibility that comes with an international effort. It truly is about capabilities, things, people, knowledge, experience that other countries have, we don't have. And so when you abrogate that responsibility, when you disrespect alliances and partnerships, or even actively work to their dissolution, you are fundamentally putting the American people at greater risk. No question.
Staying on the same topic as international alliances, what are both of your thoughts on the recent tariffs initiated by the United States on other nations, including some of our NATO allies? How does that impact those relationships?
Anybody want to answer that?
I have really smart students.
Well, I'm not an economist, but I pay attention to economics and the basics of economic order. I read occasionally. So I think I have a basic fundamental understanding of the system, of our system and world trade, which again was fundamental in the world order that we created after World War II. The United States was the architect of a world order, along with our friends and our allies. And very much at the heart of the premise of that world order was free trade, freedom of navigation. And if you change that, it's been up and down and for 80 years, I get that. And there are times when tariffs are important for self-correction, and I get that. You can debate that one way or the other. But just wholesale tariffs across the board on the basis of, well, the entire world, especially our friends, have been living off of us, and they've been freeloaders, and we're gonna change that. And it's going to go beyond and make America great again. It's going to be America is number one, and that's what we're going to look out for. And the rest of you who've been cheating us and taking advantage of us, no more. I mean, when you hear that, and if you're in an allied country, a friend of the United States that's had tremendous relationships with us in security, intelligence, trusted us, cared about us, traded with us, and he gets up and downs. What do you think the response and the reaction and the consequence of that is going to be? It's not going to be good, because you're pushing our friends, our closest friends, our closest allies, our partners away from us. One consequence of that will be, well, we're sure as hell not going to trust the United States any longer, and we'll find alternatives for our own country. We don't want to do this, but we don't have any choice. If this is where America is going to go, the Chinese are knocking on the door, and the Chinese are saying, you know, you can't trust the Americans. It's obvious. Now, we can help build those new roads for you and those new clinics and so on and so on. These countries have options. And I hear from ambassadors all the time about this. Mr. Secretary, we don't want to change directions, but we don't have any choice. If this is what America is going to do, and I mean, I saw some of the comments today about the tariffs. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, it's just insanity. And in almost every economist will tell you that it doesn't do any good for your country. It's going to lead to recession. It's going to lead to inflation. It's going to lead to probably a world recession. Do you think that helps the security of the world? Do you think this doesn't help Putin and doesn't help the Chinese? I mean, the people who are the tyrants of the world today, that America doesn't have anything in common with, starting with just basic freedom. I mean, the consequences of this are going to be extensive if this is what we continue to do. And it's going to play out everywhere and in every state. I mean, no one is going to be immune from this. And I'm very worried about this, very troubled. I've never been as concerned about the future of our country and the world as I am today. And I'm a hopeful guy because I still believe in our Constitution, but I believe in our people as much as anything, because I think Americans are good people, they're decent people, they're honest people. But when they're lied to and not told the truth, there's going to be a real test coming here. And so, I mean, I don't want to make this into a political conversation, but you can't not take politics out of all this. I mean, politics is in everything. I used to say, and a lot of my people who worked with me in the Senate know that politics doesn't run anything. It doesn't control anything. Politics reflects society. And that's the question for society. Is the American society today into the future what we want America to be and to look like in the future? And the politicians will reflect that, rarely lead that. And I think that's something that we haven't quite connected yet to where this is going. But I mean, we could be at this issue for hours and hours. But anyway, it's yours now, John.
I barely got a history degree from the University of South Florida, so I am not the guy to talk about tariffs. I will just add.
Well, he's referencing my degree from UNO, obviously.
I mean, the Secretary's right, of course, on all fronts. One of the things that I couldn't help but notice everywhere I went with President Biden for those 2.5 years, every international trip, in some form or another, foreign leaders, his counterparts, would say something akin to American leadership matters. Not just because we're the most powerful country in the world or the richest or the biggest military, but there was a unique credibility that the United States brings to the table. There's a convening power that we have. When President Biden would call he called them hasty G7 meetings even on Zoom sometimes. People would show up because what the United States decides to do or not do, how much money we spend on this or don't spend, matters to everybody else. So they look to us for example. As the president said, we have to lead not by the example of our power, but the power of our example. So it matters. And in foreign policy, It is difficult, and it should be difficult for publics around the world to discriminate between an economic policy and a military policy or a political policy or diplomatic. I mean, it all kind of rolls into one. And so when we do things in the economic sphere that is seen as punitive or discriminatory against an ally and a partner, that affects the whole relationship. I was struck that in testimony, I think it was today, the Northcom commander, he's dual-hatted as NORAD, and I think everybody knows what NORAD is. And he was asked about, what would happen if the Canadian part, NORAD is a bilateral command. It's U.S.-Canadian joint command, and it protects our skies. And he was asked, what would happen if the Canadians, as a result of all this other tension, pulled out of NORAD or curtailed their support? And he was very, very frank about the dangers that would impose. So everything, it's all related, it's all connected, and you can't just isolate an economic policy and treat it separately and distinct as to the rest of the relationship. And these relationships are precious. The worst time to pull on a friend, an ally, a partner, is when you need them and you've ghosted the relationship, when you've walked away from it. Relationships, alliances are like gardens, and you have to keep feeding them. You got to keep growing them because it helps everybody.
Thank you. So you both mentioned a little bit about communication and relationships within a team. And recently what's been going on with the signal chats that the new administration has been within the news. So the question I have for you, Secretary Hagel, we'll start with you. You were recently in the news about your thoughts about that signal chat and about the prospects of actually sharing possible plans. Do you still stand by your initial assessment, especially with the recent things that have hit in today's news about additional signal chats that were part of this team and relationship that they've had for communication? And that goes back again to you, Admiral Kirby, about the relationship and communications between a team. How is that handled, and maybe in the past, and then what do you think going forward?
Well, yes, I strongly continue to believe what I said in interviews last week about the danger of this episode. John said something that's very important here in all of this, that the world is interconnected. And you can't take just pieces, trade pieces or intelligence pieces or the signal pieces and use those as one-offs. No, they're all connected in how the world sees us, how we see the world, trust, confidence. It doesn't make any difference. It's all interconnected. So if you believe that, and I do, and I lived it, in what we saw in the signal chat, why that was so dangerous. I was asked on CBS and some others, in your opinion, was that classified? Damn right it was classified. I mean, are you kidding me? You talk about times and weapons launches and so on, and that's not classified? So what one reaction is going to be, and already is our most trusted partners who share intelligence with us, the Five Eyes, others, can they trust us anymore? I mean, if we're this sloppy, or if we're this incompetent, or if we're this reckless, and that we pull something like this, my God, I mean, is this in our interest to be continuing to share the most important classified intelligence information with the United States, with this cast of characters? I mean, and not even, they don't see anything wrong with it. That's number one. Number two, you could have very well put the pilots of those planes in danger, because the timing of those things were like 2 hours, 2.5 hours before they actually were in the air. The wrong people that would have picked up those signals, they could have used that against us and really done some damage to our own people, the pilots, to other people that were involved in that project. So if you just isolate on those 2 points that I just made, is that enough? I mean, and then to have excuses made, well, it's no big deal, it's the way it is, or why you would even start something like this on an unclassified government channel. I mean, it's just beyond me. Someone who's had responsibility for that kind of stuff. And even just kind of let's have a chat about this. No, you don't have a chat about this. If you want to talk about this, what all administrations have done, Republicans and Democrats, you go to the Situation Room in the White House, where that's classified. Or you'd go to classified rooms in the Pentagon, the tank or whatever. You didn't just get on a
You can use a classified call to
all that stuff. And then I did different classified exchanges on government secure networks on phones. And I mean, I'll give just one example, and then John will go to you. But when President Obama, the night he pulled down our attack on Syria, I had just flown back from a NATO meeting in Europe, and Lilibet and I got it in Andrews about 6 o'clock on a Friday night. They had me on a secure network on the plane. You were on the plane with me. It was all secure. Came home, took a shower, changed clothes. Lilibet and I went to dinner that night. And about 9 o'clock that night, my security people come into the restaurant and said, "Mr. Secretary, the President needs to talk to you. It's urgent right now." Well, I didn't take the call in the restaurant. I didn't take the call on my cell phone. I mean, you never bring your cell phone in. You leave your cell phone outside. Your cell phones are never brought in anywhere. So I went out into the security car. They had me on a secure line with the president. My security guards got out of the car, so I was the only one in the car. And so I talked to the president, but that was a security line. And why anybody a Secretary of Defense or a National Security Advisor, people with responsibility for these things wouldn't think about that. I mean, before you do anything, is beyond me. And I hope they've learned a lesson. I hope it doesn't happen again. But unfortunately for our allies, they can't be sure of that. And also, at one other point, and John would be closer to this than I am, because he's a career military. You send a signal inside the Pentagon, and through your entire national security apparatus in our government, like, my God, can we have confidence in this crowd? And boy, that you don't want that in your own team throughout the system. So with that good news, John,
all that is 100% accurate. We had a rule in the Pentagon when I was working for the Secretary that when we had a mission like that, we would not acknowledge, because oftentimes, because of social media today, pilots conduct a mission, they drop their bombs. There's video on social media of the explosions, and people maybe even get video of the aircraft, and it could be pretty obvious that it's American aircraft. And so my phone would be lighting up with reporters calling, was that the United States? Did you do that? How did you do it? With how many? And our rule was, and this was a rule we kept in place when Secretary Austin was Secretary of Defense, that we would not confirm for reporters whether the United States military had been involved in a strike anywhere until we knew from the combatant commander, in this case it would have been the Central Command commander, that the pilots were in safe airspace. Either that they had returned to base or that they were close enough that their safety was, we never, even on background, even anonymously, we would never confirm an operation like that until we knew the pilots were safe. And it, caused a lot of consternation with the press corps because they had all this video and all these eyewitness accounts, and I just refused to do it. There's no question that using an unclassified system to communicate launch times well in advance of time on target is a dangerous thing to do. And I agree. I hope that they've learned from this, and it doesn't happen again. But I kept thinking, as it was happening, can you imagine the hue and the cry if Jake Sullivan had done that? And Tony Blinken and Lloyd Austin were on a chat like that, and it got given to a reporter. A reporter was added in there. The hue and the cry, the screaming and the yelling that would have happened, and the calling for heads. And what are you hearing now? It was a thoughtful conversation. It was measured and deliberate. The hypocrisy here is the other thing that bothers me. And then there was content in the chats, if you look at them, that, and this gets back to our discussion about allies, content that bothered me. And everybody's focused on the classified nature of it and the mistake of putting Jeff Goldberg on there and how that happened. But there was content in there about basically potentially changing the timing of the strikes so as to put pressure on the Europeans, and even having the Europeans pay for this strike in some way. Remuneration, I think, is what the word was. That people didn't agree is not uncommon. That's what the interagency process is about, to get everybody's views. But that there was any discussion at all that it's somehow, let's not come to our European allies' rescue and maybe not do this strike, or this strike is helping them out in ways that we don't want to not take a strike on legitimate terrorists. And I have no problem with the strikes they took. They were building on capabilities that President Biden put in place. We had been striking targets in Yemen. And so the only reason they had the ability to do it as quickly as they did it was because of a process we put in place. But to not do it, or to consider not doing it, just because you want to stick our European allies in the nose, that to me, that's just foreign policy malpractice.
May I just add one thing? The reason that I did those interviews last week is I turn down a lot of interviews every day on a lot of things. But I felt I had some responsibility from someone who had those responsibilities at one time to let the public know that, no, this is not okay. Regardless of what others are saying, because most people don't understand the depth of this. I mean, it's just, you're busy raising your families and getting your kids to school and making a living and so on and so on. You don't have time to. So, I think I had a responsibility, and I'll continue to do this. And this is the way I see it. When I see things happening that are so blatantly wrong and dangerous for this country, I think I've got to say something, and I will.
Thank you both. Thank you both. It has been a pleasure hosting you both tonight and being able to pick your brains on important topics, not just for our academic audience, but for our entire community. But before we finish our discussion, I have one last question. What are your own moments of inspiration? So instead of asking what keeps you up at night, can I ask you, what can we look forward to? What are some inspirational moments that we have to look forward to for the years to come?
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Well, I addressed a little bit of that, I think, when I said I still have great faith in this country, confidence in the Constitution, rule of law, 3 co-equal branches of government, but I said mostly it's the people. And I'm still inspired every day by what I see from people. The goodness, the decency, the honesty. I mean, not everybody, I get it. But it's who we are, I think. And I think when you really define it down, why do people for over 250 years want to come to this country? They don't want to go to China or Russia. No other country represents so much opportunity, potential, freedom, allow yourself to develop and so on. And I think that's such an inspirational element that no country on earth possesses, that I still believe in that maybe that's old-fashioned, but I still think that's relevant to the future. And that still inspires me and gives me a hope that we're going through a tough time, but that we'll get it turned around. We always have. We've always self-corrected. But I would add this. We live in a world that is so immediate. We don't have the time that we used to have to self-correct. And that's a quality that America has that I don't think any country in the world has, that self-correction process. And now it's been shortened to the point where it's everything is now, immediate. And you just don't have that time to pull back and reflect. And for society to kind of catch up, and then for its leaders to represent that. And so I'm aware of that, I recognize that, and that conditions me, but overall, I'd still bet on this country.
I've been out of a job now for 2 months. So the only thing keeping me up at night is my 61-year-old prostate and my and my wife's 2 cats. To me, it's the highest act of patriotism to protest peacefully, to make your voice heard, and to stand for something. So that, and I don't think, I mean, this is an example tonight. That's not dead here, and it should never die here. But the other 2 things, people related. One is our civil servants, and that I would include the career military, career foreign service, the career government employees is what I really want to say. They have and they will continue to serve no matter who is in the White House, no matter what party's in power, because they take an oath to the Constitution. They don't take an oath to a party, and they're still at it. Now, a lot of them have lost their jobs, and that has caused personal, and I think it's going to eventually cause national security challenges, personal challenges for sure, national security challenges to come, I think, that are gonna affect us for many months and years to come. But I've talked to some of them, some of my friends in the Foreign Service, certainly my friends in the military, and I have friends in the civil service too. And I've been surprised, I shouldn't say surprised, certainly encouraged by how many of them have said that even though they've been laid off, even though they're on administration leave, even if they can't use their badge to get in the building anymore, they don't even know if their job exists anymore, they want to come back. They want to keep serving the government. And that is something precious, man. That is just something precious that these people are still, they still take that oath seriously, and they want to keep serving and continue to act on it. The other people-related thing I'm encouraged by are reporters. Now, I recognize, and I mean, there are some ownership issues in the press that are legitimately a concern. And I worry about that too, that there are some decisions being made at very senior levels in the media not to be as aggressive in reporting as they could be. But if you talk to reporters, the men and women who are actually out there trying to get the news to the American people, they are still working it, and they're working it really hard. And I think the fourth estate, as we call it, the press, are going to be ever more important to us in coming years. And it's important that they continue to be able to do their job. So if you don't subscribe to an outlet, think about subscribing to an outlet, even an outlet that you don't agree with. And that especially is true locally, because local news has taken a huge hit. So please support local outlets as well. Support PBS, support NPR. These are important outlets that, and these are people that are now doing jobs that don't come without risk, personal and professional risk. I would ask you to keep reporters in mind and keep supporting their craft and what they're doing.
At this point, some thank yous are in order. I would like to thank you both, Secretary Hagel, and thank you, Admiral Kirby, Secretary Hagel, thank you for sponsoring this incredible event at our university and continuing to nurture the next generation of American leaders in global affairs. And thank you, Admiral Kirby, for speaking to our students and our community and addressing these important issues and challenges facing our country today. And finally, thank you to our students, our faculty, administrators, and our university partner at the Atlantic Council, all of whom who have worked hard to bring you this event tonight, and also all the students that provided me the questions for tonight. So thank you again, and I turn it back over to Randy.
Son, there we go. Just one more thing. Chancellor Lee, could you come up here? Because I think we have one more piece of business, Chancellor. Can you come back up? Yeah, we got one more piece of business. Very, very important piece of business. Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to our distinguished speaker for handling the disruptions with such grace, and it's really remarkable. Now I'd like to give the personal endorsement to Secretary Hagel for picking, Admiral Kirby to be your spokesperson for that. So we have a little tradition at UNO. We want to meet you as a Maverick, so we have a personal gift from University of Nebraska, Omaha, to Admiral Kirby.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your grace. Yes.
Wow. I'm gonna have to hit the weight room to fill this out.
I wear it like a dress. Don't worry.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Appreciate it.
Chancellor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.